Oh, yay. All right, so I'm Matt Bernard. I wrote Matthew on my tag because when I say Matt, then I get like Mac or Mark or Mike or whatever. So I wrote Matthew on my tag. So here's my tale. So I lived in Los Angeles for 15 years, and I had a friend who had a guest spot on a sitcom that only lasted 2 seasons. Anyway, we won't name it. But so she was the guest star, and she said, like, can I bring my friend, Matt? He'd love to be a writer, and blah, blah, blah. So I went, and then there was somebody who was going to be out on vacation, like, the next week, and they really liked me the 3 days that I was there, and they said, do you want to fill in? So I said, sure. So I filled in, and then they said, we have a writer, or a writer's assistant, who's pregnant. And I was like, oh, okay. Wasn't me. So anyway, but she said, so they said, like, would you like to come back when, like, you know, when she can't, when, you know, the birth is happening and all that. So I said, yeah, I can do that. That would be great. And then the show got canceled. And then it turned into 2009. And then nobody was hiring. You know what happened. And I was at the Writers Guild, and I had friends who were members of the Writers Guild, and even they couldn't get work, like people who'd written and produced like multiple episodes of stuff. And I was like, oh my God, if they can't get a job, like what am I supposed to do? So I had a bunch of stuff that I had written and kind of packed away. And I thought, what am I doing? Like just waiting for somebody else to like approve me? So I just said, I'm gonna find a way to do one of these ideas. And I did. I ran into like an old friend who had like all kinds of video equipment and stuff. And he agreed to help me like for a price. And so we worked on things together for 4 seasons. And it had, I think it's up to around 1 million views on YouTube, which isn't like too bad. I guess, I don't know. And, but I thought it went really well. But I did learn some things through writing sitcoms and web series that I'll share with you. So first of all, I'm just going to give you some highlights from this. Sitcoms are usually 22 minutes. Like we know that. They're half an hour, but there's about 8 minutes of ads, so they're about 22 minutes. And usually it's about a page is about a page of screen time. So you're looking at writing a 22-page like little play, and that will turn into a 22-minute sitcom on screen. So, and sitcoms are very structured, and you may not think that they are, but they are like toying with you, and they especially toy with you. When do you think? When do you think the sitcoms are creating their greatest moment of comedy or suspense? Right at the commercial break, right?
Oh.
They want to do something to make you like click through those Geico ads or whatever and come back and pick it right back up. So everything is leading up to that precipitous moment. Now, there are, of course, a beginning and a middle and an end. So you would think that sitcoms follow a 3-act structure, right? Beginning, middle, end. But they don't. They follow a 2-act structure. So how it works is Act 1 is typically they take either the character or characters or the situation that those characters are in, and they develop the situation, they introduce the problem, and then right at that commercial break, where are they? They're at that moment where like, oh, they're in this situation. What are they going to do? How are they going to get out of this? Bam, end of Act 1, commercial break. That's how it works. Then Act 2 is seeing them in that precarious situation, and how are those characters going to get out of it and return back to the life, their normal life that they had at the beginning. I'm sure you probably noticed that most sitcoms don't change all that much, right? And I'll tell you why. There's always these precipitous moments around season 4 or 5. That's when somebody has a baby, or somebody gets divorced, or there's a special episode or something. Those are always either at the end of season 4 or in season 5 when, guess how many episodes they've either hit or they're about to hit? 100. 100 episodes means syndication. Every TV show that is on TV is trying to hit 100. So they are not going to screw up the formula for the first 99 episodes. So those characters, they might move along. They're going to inch. They're going to have their problems, and they're going to inch along, but nobody is going to like win the lottery. This is like the typical example of when a sitcom goes totally wrong. Was Roseanne. You guys remember Roseanne. She did 8 seasons or 9 seasons, and they were poor, struggling middle class, and then we won the lottery, like 40 million. And then everybody was like, what? Like, what? And they did it like all wrong, and guess what? End of the season, it was done. So those are big mistakes. Now, the other thing is you can say, well, I don't know if I have enough for an 11 or for a 22-minute episode or a 22-minute script. This also applies if you write an 11-page script. In other words, you spend 6 pages or 7 like introducing the situation and getting them, I call it up the tree. You get the character like up the tree, and then the last few pages are them like getting out of the tree and returning back to exactly where they were at the beginning. So you don't have to think like, oh, I can't write 22 pages, or oh, that's so hard. Like, you can cut it down. You can make it 6 minutes and 4 minutes of whatever, and 2 minutes of a resolution or whatever. It doesn't really matter, but that is typically the sitcom structure. So also, I'll throw this in. Sometimes, I'm sure you've seen this, Friends will have like a 30-second thing at the beginning, and they're talking, and they're in Central Perk, and it'll end on a funny line, and then, oh, I'll be there, you know, and then they run some ads, and then they come back, and then the real story starts. So you can add a teaser to the beginning. Not all sitcoms have them. It kind of was a 90s thing, I think. I don't know if they do it. Do they do it now? Like, does Modern Family do them? I don't know. I don't watch them.
Sometimes.
Yeah, so I think they like it because they can throw in some more like ads in after the chorus of the opening. So
they can toss in jokes that don't fit otherwise in the episode.
Right. That scene may have been from something that was supposed to happen, like in another storyline, and they just had to scrap it, or they found out that the actual story like didn't really work, but the beginning was great, and then they'll just add it to the beginning of another thing. So, you know, whatever. But and then at the end, and Friends does this too, they'll have like a little tag with like Gunther or something, and it's literally like maybe 3 to 5 lines, like set up, punchline or something, and it lasts maybe 15, 20 seconds, and they're putting all that stuff about, you know, who is the unit producer and the guest stars and all that stuff at the bottom. So that's what a tag is. And all that takes a little bit of time away from the 22 minutes. So I just wanted to say one more thing about characters and how do you figure out like who's doing what. So there's usually an A and a B story, and sometimes a C story. So, and the A story, typically, I'll always use this example because it's easy, is Will and Grace, right? We know Will and Grace. So the A story, I cannot think of an example where this isn't true. The A story always revolves around Will and or Grace. And it takes up the majority of the episode. So it's say 60% of those 22 pages are gonna be about that. That cliffhanger moment, that end of Act 1, happens involving those characters. Sometimes Will and Grace didn't do that. They would end on a funny line with like the Jack Karen storyline and then go to commercial, but usually not. Usually the Act 1 ends with the A storyline because that is where the biggest drama is happening. And people always say like, drama? Well, sitcoms are just like drama with a funny resolution. Like if you think about it, right? Like they're having like a really big problem. Like there's one where Grace goes to the theater with a guy she doesn't really like, and she runs into Will's dad with another woman that is not his mother, and she finds out they're having an affair and blah blah blah, and it's been going on like a while, and then she's like, should I tell Will? Commercial break. And then does she tell Will? That all happens in the second part. And is she gonna say it? Is she not gonna say it? How is she gonna say it? La la la. So that is the A story. So that one has to be your most compelling and utilizes your core characters. In other words, if it's called Will and Grace, 99% of the time, the main storylines are going to be about them. Now here's the kicker. If you have a show like Modern Family or Friends or, if I can think of another one, that have 6 characters or like 3 families, there can be an almost equal channel of storyline for those 3. So your A story, your B story, and your C story may be almost equal in terms of the importance, because it's not called Modern Chandler, it's called Modern Family, so it's going to be about everybody in that family. But usually, right, it's going to focus in on one of those more importantly than the other 2. And then those other 2 either going to contribute or have their own separate thing going on, right? So there's still typically a main course of events that are happening that involves like one of those 3 units. Then there's usually like a slightly lesser one for the B story, and sometimes the C story can just literally be a running gag, or it can be very, very minor. But the way that I usually explain this is, if you had, I used to get the TV Guide, because I was a kid in the 80s, when they had those, and they would come to your house, and you would read, and you would see like the Mary Tyler Moore Show, or MASH, and it would say, Hawkeye, has to, drive to another camp and makes out with a nurse or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that never happened. But, it was always, the description in the TV Guide was about the most major names that were on that show. You didn't really ever read one that said Klinger or the da-da-da-da-da. Like, so you have to figure out, like, who am I focusing on? Am I focusing my A story on the most well-known characters? And the other kicker is like The Simpsons, because if you think about The Simpsons, or you think about The Simpsons versus Everybody Loves Raymond, right? Everybody Loves Raymond is a family show, but how often did you see those kids? You know what I'm saying?
There were kids?
There were kids. There were Allie and like twin boys or something that we never saw. Anyway, so if you're going to write, say, a spec episode, I'll explain what that means, of Everybody Loves Raymond, but you wouldn't know because it's been off the air for like 9 years. You would not write a story that was about Allie and something going on with Allie like, unless 90% of that storyline has to do with, like, Raymond has to go meet her teacher and she flirts with him. And then it's not really about Allie anymore. Allie, like, put them together. But then, like, clear her out. We don't need to see her, you know? You know, there's certain shows where the kids are there and they talk about the kids, but you don't really see them. They don't drive the storyline. So you've got to figure out, like, what is your storyline and does it fit the parameters of what they do? So this is my other thing. I would say, if you're gonna think about, like, crafting a story with characters, would be to find a show that you like. Even if you want to create your own thing, I would say find a show that you like that's maybe in season 2 or 3 that's popular. Don't pick one that isn't popular. You know, because nobody will know what you're talking about. So find a show which is like with the Goldbergs, it's been on for like 6 seasons now. So even that's getting a little dated or whatever. But find one that's like a hit, and then figure out a storyline that those characters would do, and then write it. And write it in like the voices of those characters. Because if you can do that, if you can write it somebody else's characters, like for them, then you can probably do your own, if that makes sense. And you're also putting restrictions on yourself so you don't go wrong, right? Because you can have big ideas for your own thing, and then they all go like this. And then you're like, what's this show about? I don't know. It's about all kinds of stuff. Like, no, it's not. And you've got to like hone it in. Like, you got to figure out like what family are you sticking with? What characters are your main characters? And drive it home and write about them, and then have the other things like coming to them, but just don't overwhelm what your storyline is. Does that make sense? So that's what I mean by like sitcoms are manipulating you and you don't really know it, you know? Yeah. So, so I think I discussed story. So you want to put people up a tree. You got to figure out like what that is. And then I would say, if you've got characters, say you have thoughts in your head that aren't scary. No, say you have thoughts in your head and you think, oh, I want to write a show about this. You had better be ready to like know who those people are, because if you don't know, like how is the audience supposed to know, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. So you can leave room for like a little bit of development over time, but like if you don't know where Sally grew up on a farm and had 7 brothers or whatever, like that is important information that if she's now in New York City and she's a small town girl, that is the show right there, right? Small town girl moves to New York City and tries to make it as a banker or whatever. Actually, that's Don't Trust the Bitch in Apartment 20. Remember that show? That was genius. But yeah, so that's, you have to know that. You have to figure out, your character just didn't like emerge like out of like an egg, right? They had a lot. They may be 24, but what were they like before? Were they like overweight and nerdy, and now they're like slim, like Monica, like on front, like, you know what I mean? You could see, like, she didn't say it, they revealed it later, but she definitely had like issues from that telegraphed the way she behaved in her current situation. So you have to really, really think about, just don't say, well, her name is Sally, she's 24, and she's in a big city. Like, but what, where, how did she get there? What were the little stepping stones that happened along the way that made her make all the decisions to where we see her now? And let me tell you, that is the tough part. That is the really hard part because you I can't even explain like what you have to do. You have to just do the work, and it's not about coming up with it like while you're writing it, because what are you going to write about if you don't know the people, right? You can't really do that. It's like impossible, right? You have to know like where they're coming from in order to know like where they're going, right? Yeah, makes sense, right? Yeah, I couldn't have stated that any better. So that's my biggest thing is if you're gonna say I'm gonna make a show about crazy parents or whatever or this or that, like they can be just like your parents, but guess what? Go sit with your parents and grill them for a couple of hours about like where it's amazing what you don't know. They had 25 years probably on this planet before you appeared. What were they like? A lot of times we don't even have those conversations, but you need to have them like with other people to gain a better understanding, and also have them like within yourself. You can make all the shit up yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't have to do this research. It can be totally your own creative process, or you can ask other people to get that information. And I would say the easiest way to do it is write from like what you know, right? Like if you've never been to New York City, don't try to write Sex in the City. Also you're maybe too young, I don't know. But that is probably not gonna ring true. And if I say, okay, well give me what's Samantha gonna do in these episodes, or what's Carrie, what were their names? Anyway, and you're like, I don't know. You're like gonna be like, well, I think she might. Oh, as soon as you say you think, you're in trouble. You've got to know. You gotta know. You gotta be able to say, well, she's from here, so she's gonna. Which brings me to my other point is, if you're going to think about writing a storyline with characters that repeat, you need to write out all this stuff about the characters, because it's going to become part of your Bible, right? You then, like, before you even write your first script, you'd better write, what's going on? Oh, you'd better write out about 20 to 25 scenarios for each one of those characters and situations that they could end up in. Because guess how many episodes there are in a typical TV season? About 22 to 24, 25, right? So if you say, like, oh, I've got this great idea, and I'm going to write this sitcom, I'm going to say, what else you got? What else you got them going through? What other hoops? Or if you say, oh, I don't know, I'm going to say, well, like, figure out 20 more. If it's a long, long time, like, if I give you a piece of paper and say, fill this out, and write some ideas down, and you can't, you're either maybe writing about something you don't know about, or writing something about, I feel like there's like a swing set.
An old swing set.
Maybe you're writing about something that you don't know about, or it's just not a conceivable idea to run like long term. Because the other thing you want to think of is you remember when Rachel, I'm gonna go back to Friends because it's one of my favorite and I grew up with it, so I won't say how old I am. But Rachel at the beginning, like, she didn't want to marry that stupid guy, and then she got a job at the coffee shop, right? But then by the end, I think of season 1 or season 2, she got that job at Bloomingdale's, and then she liked the guy who worked there, la 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 la, you know, and it led to all kinds of things. So you also need to have like arcs for the characters, like over time. You do not want to do like a Roseanne, and 1 minute they're rich, or 1 minute they're poor, and then all of a sudden they're rich, and it changes everything. You want to kind of ripple their movement, like little steps. You know, like, I'm sure you're not going to be a barista, right, at Starbucks, and then all of a sudden you're their CFO. Like, what? And you think, what just happened, right? That doesn't make sense. So you've got to like do those little curves that get them to another place. Because if you do things like too fast, the audience will like go, what? That's ridiculous. That was way too easy for them. You do not want to make things easy for your characters, right? You're putting them up a tree like every single episode. So if you're just like make something super easy, did they go? Hello.
Hi.
Wait, I'm gonna give you stuff. I get it? No. Hello.
Thank you.
Hi, Alex. Wait, what's your name? Mom May?
Oh, yeah. My way.
I love it.
Thank you.
So you want to make things as difficult for your sitcom characters as you possibly can, which is why, if you think about it, are there a lot of sitcoms that are about rich people? I can think of Soap. I
Prince
think
of
Soap,
Bel-Air.
they might have been slightly richy, but then it was making fun of actual soap operas. Although nobody probably knows what the hell I'm talking about because it was on in the 70s. But it had, I forget the guy. Anyway. But yeah, so.
Fresh Prince, they did a kind of the discontinuity between Will Smith's character, who was from, you know, a poor neighborhood, and he's dumped on these rich people.
That's right, yeah. That's kind of a fish out of water, like storyline, right?
Mhm.
Which is rife with all kinds of possibilities of adventures, you know what I mean? It's kind of
Mhm.
like when, and every sitcom seems to do this, when the characters go camping, right? I swear to God, every sitcom has a camping classic episode. And it's because those people don't know, you know, they have no idea about like the wilderness or whatever. Maybe they think they did, and comedy ensues. And they did it on Three's Company too. I just saw their camping episode on Logo like a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, this is exactly like the problem, you know? And somebody was making out with Jack, and then he finds out it's the guy who owns the house's wife, and anyway, it was hilarious. And were they was he gonna tell, or was she gonna tell? Hilarity ensued. But of course, where did they end up back in their apartment in San Diego. So, yeah. So that's important to remember, that if you can't think of a show where there's a bunch of rich people and it's funny, it's probably because a lot of other people have tried it and it doesn't work. But Godspeed, like I mean, if you're like living in Bel Air and there's some hilarious shit going on, like I say, write it, you know, like if you're living it and it's funny to you, like it might just work. But I mean, the funny thing is maybe if they get splattered with like horse manure like every episode, or not every episode, but you know what I mean? Like if something happens where like that degrades them and then they go back, like that can be really funny. The only one I can think of is Arrested Development. Weren't like the mom and dad like really rich?
Let's not forget The Nanny.
Oh, and the Nanny. That's right. But that was a fish out of water kind of situation too, right? She was like, whoa, you know, she kind of had the hots for him, but he was the boss, and you know, and they kept that going for a long, long time. I mean, this is why people be like, why can't they just get together? not till episode about 98 or 100, you know, because they don't want to screw up the dynamics of a show that they put a lot of money into. I mean, they're not doing these shows for cheap. They're spending millions of dollars like per episode, and if it goes like astray, and the audience goes, you know, then they gotta find another sitcom, and the chances of your sitcom like hitting and being a hit is small, right? So, yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about like my process and my project was, I wrote a sitcom that was basically, like the pitch line was a gay committed couple help their straight friends through their like crazy relationship scenarios. So the reason why I actually thought that was funny, and it was, is because the gays weren't the funny ones. The gays had like the normal, like, you know, come home at night, cook dinner, like, and then these people would come in and be like, oh my God, I slept with so-and-so, and I don't know, I think I slept with his dad or two, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, they would, you know, they would come up with like crazy situations, and the gays were like the sounding board for all the other characters, which to me was radically different. God love Will and Grace, but Jack was a complete lunatic. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I couldn't really relate to Jack. Even being like an actor and a performer, I was like, you know? God love him, like he's hilarious. Him and Karen have some of the greatest comedic bits, like in probably the history of television. But, you know, somehow I could not relate to like either of them, despite how funny their stuff was. And I thought, where is the kind of people that I know that are gay and like committed? I mean, even Will would have a boyfriend for like, a 3-episode arc, right? And then it was like, oh, he had to move to Seattle or something, you know, and that was stupid. Meanwhile, Grace could get married and have a boyfriend for a whole season or two or whatever, and that seemed okay. And I thought, what? That's ridiculous, right? Why can't Will find a loving relationship for that extended period of time, right? Why could Grace? So that really like irked me, because it was almost like they were afraid. Well, they were on like free TV, you know, so I think they were a little bit afraid of really showing like public what a committed gay relationship might look like, that it was exactly like other people, right? I don't know, I think people are like afraid of that. It's like, yeah, we're just people too, shut up, you know? So that's what I tried to do. So I actually made like the straight people like the butt of the joke, which to me was funny because I kind of got tired of like the sassy gay best friend, you know, like, oh, I've seen that like a million times. So I didn't want to do that again, you know. So that's kind of how I developed the idea of my show, and I like patterned it off of like some gay couples that I knew that were like together, and even though they were together, they still had their like problems, but they were like the norm. They were like the normal ones, which I thought anyway was funny. So that then led me down the path of figuring out what the ideas were. You know what I mean? Like, I then knew, like, oh, my other characters are gonna do this, and then they're gonna do this, and then these are gonna do this. And the only thing is that I wrote a gay show where the gay characters were like in it the least, which didn't really matter. They were more of like the sounding board for the rest who were pushing the action. So usually, they, like my gay character, because I was in it too, me and my boyfriend were like the B story, or, you know, and the other A story was like more funny, more like engaged, and we would like pop in and kind of help them to resolve what was going on. But we were definitely the B story. Yeah, sometimes we didn't even have a story. You know, we were just part of the A story or part of the B story. There wasn't something pulling us along until later. Season 4 was like all about me, actually. So mainly because trying to get 6 actors in the same place in LA is a real bitch. Like, it really, like, for continuity, I did 4 seasons, and I had 3 guys who played my boyfriend, who was supposed to be the same guy, because I could not get, like, anyone to come back. You know, like, hey, I'm doing this show this year, like I did it last year, and they're like, oh yeah, oh, I'd love to do that, send me the script, oh yeah, let's meet. Meanwhile, like, you know, when you like really brought it down to brass tacks, they like couldn't show up, they couldn't commit to whatever. I was like, I gotta recast my boyfriend. You know, so I eventually just decided to kind of cut as many side characters as I could and like focus it on me. Like, hey, I knew I'd show up. You know what I'm saying? So and I'm like, you can't swing a cat in LA without hitting like a cute guy. I'm like, so what? So he wasn't the same guy as last season. You know? Auditioning was fun. No, just kidding. I'm like, take your shirt off. No, I didn't say that. But that was an episode of Will and Grace. I don't know if you saw that one where they did a fake, him and Karen did fake auditions for a show they weren't really doing. And they were like, oh, we've got to measure you. Whatever. I don't know how Karen talks, but it was hilarious. Anyway, it was hilarious. But I'm just saying, like, you've got to kind of improvise with what is coming to you, if that makes, like, coming into your world. So I'll give you, like, another example. Or I'll ask you guys, does anyone here have an idea that they're thinking, like, oh, I really want to write this, I know these characters, I want to flesh it out and do something. Has anyone got, like, a kernel of an idea, like, in their head that they might want to share?
Well, I don't have an idea. Well, I have an idea. It's already like done.
Oh.
I just want to mention it now that we're talking about this. I'm writing this story for my English class about this like janitor who's like secretly Jesus in like a White House, and like there's a guy that comes in and he's like, I call him like the assassin, but he's like the president's twin brother, and like he's trying to like take his position, and he's like, the president's never there, but like he's like always asking me around and like trying to be sneaky and everything so he can get you. But at the end, it's like the whole thing is called like a lesson. I'm sorry.
No, right.
I just like saw a correlation to everything.
Right. So I think Jesus, the janitor, like would be your main character, right? Does that make? Did everybody hear that? Like, you know, they got the sense of like he's the glue in every episode that causes something to happen or whatever, right? Now, can you build a set that looks like the White House? Like, I love the idea, but like if you say to your friends or like a film crew, like, I want to do this, and it's something that is going to be like really, really tough to like pull off like visually, then you might want to like send it over here, like as your second like idea. If, and I'll give an example, like say your dad owns a cemetery or something, right? Like gay zombie, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like write something where you can use like that location, right? Like if you can be there and it's interesting and weird and whatever, and you can flesh it out.
Nice.
But,
Like,
hey, there's the time for your games on
There
the
we-
signal. Flush it out.
flesh it out. There we go. They're out and they're fleshy. Now, so that's what I mean. Like, don't like if you have an idea and you think, oh, I really want to film this and it'd be funny and whatever. Like, make it somewhere that you have access to, because if you know, I don't know, like, if it's impossible for you to really film it, then it might not be like the best idea. Like, I love that idea. Like, does it have to be at the White House?
No, it doesn't.
See, there we go.
Yeah, we kind of had to do this in 30 minutes.
Oh, right. So it could just be at like rich people's house.
Yeah.
And then find a rich person and say you want to use their house. Like, right? Right?
They're
Like,
famously great about that.
I love that, having a big film crew in there. But I was gonna say, like, surround yourselves with people who, like, have your back. Like, I paid my guy, but I also, like, he did it so discounted. And, I was like, half the time I wasn't in the scenes I was in until, like, the last season when it was all about me. And so I had a hard time, like, holding the boom mic and doing my lines at the same time. But the other seasons, it was less, like, about me. So, I was, like, holding the boom mic. I was, like, checking the lighting, running out to the car to got whatevers and getting the pizzas for the people and the crew and all that. So, if you can create, like, people around you that, like, have the skills and they're writing something and you can help them, and you're writing something and they can help you, and then you learn and other things. Like, I never really did learn how to edit. That was boring as shit to me, pardon me. It's just sitting there like going, what's the best take? Ooh, I gotta watch like 4 hours of footage to edit a 15-second scene. Like, I don't want to do that. So, I left that to, like, the directing guy. Like, just find the people that can help you, right? Like, that's the main deal. And just, try to tailor a story for something that you could see yourself actually being able to, like, complete, or else you're gonna, like, run into some, like, roadblocks. And then if you start running into roadblocks, then your story and all your jokes are gonna end up, let's just put it mildly, fucked up, like, right? If you can't film it the way that it is, then, and your story changes, you're probably gonna have to, like, start from scratch. That's why I said, like, can they just be rich people?
Yeah.
Because then if you can use your story and just alter it a little bit and make it not Mr. President, Mr. Beeswax, or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
Mr. Beeswax. And then go from there. But I do love that idea. But does anybody have questions?
You said you were going to tell us what a spec episode is?
Oh, a spec. A spec is what I said about writing an episode of a show that currently is on TV. So you're gonna take those characters in a situation, and you're gonna invent a situation that hopefully they haven't done before. Like, I started writing The Simpsons, and I got like halfway through it, and then I had Bart on American Idol, and then they did it. I'm like, Mom. So I had to just kind of toss it, because then it looks like I just, But mine was going in a totally different direction. That's the thing too. Like, those sitcom writers, like, they're picking what they, the studio, whoever is rubber stamping, like, their scripts. But your idea of so-and-so on American Idol could turn out completely different. So although the nugget of the idea is the same, it's your voice, so it's gonna be like something different. You just can't use your voice so that nobody knows that it's Bart Simpson that's talking, which is the tricky part of a spec. You've got to come up with a story for them and then sound just like they do, which is like harder than you think, because we want to be creative. We want to, like, you know, give characters our own voice. But my theory is, like, if you can listen to something else and like kind of mimic it, you're kind of halfway there. Because the problem is if you just start writing something, your voice could be all over the place because you might not know like who they are yet. So, and then if you think about, like, oh, I'm gonna write a Phoebe storyline. Well, Phoebe has a very distinctive point of view. So it's gonna help you if you're writing a character later, like, oh, I need a distinctive point of view. Because if you're writing and you're stuck, it's probably because you don't know the point of view. So you don't know what to write because you don't know where they're coming from. And you don't know where they're going. You don't know where they want to go. That's why Don't Trust the Bitch in Apartment 23. It was like so good. Because you knew like where those characters were going. You knew what they wanted to do. Why did that only last like a season and a half, by the way? Anyway, so yeah, that's a show that I wanted to spec and then it went off the air. So that's what I mean by spec script, is just trying to write a show that you like but stick to like its parameters. And yeah, and then just, you know, don't give it to everybody, but try to find people to read it. And if they just sit there like, you know, I mean, people should be laughing, right? Like, the other tricky thing is, I got like 2 minutes. The other tricky thing is you've got to figure out a way to like impart information. Well, how many people like getting information? Like, you know, it's pretty boring, right? Like, I hope I'm not boring. But if you're giving out information and that's all, your sitcom's gonna be boring as hell. Like, right? You've got to figure out a way to like give the information, but be funny about it. You know, like set up like information, set up punchline. Information, set up punchline. That's also why, like, I'm thinking of Family Ties right now, which you've probably never heard of. But that's why like little siblings like can have the funniest lines of a show, because the older people are talking about information, and the little kids don't give a rat's ass about the information. They're just gonna pipe in with something funny they heard, you know, or oh, that sounds like her, you know, and they just kids say like the stupidest thing, really, and yet it's funny. So half the sitcoms, like, I mean, think of like Rudy on like the Cosby Show, or I'm sorry, showing my age now, but they just pop out with like the funniest stuff because, you know, they're not really adding to the story. Like someone else is saying something and they are the punchline. So that's like kind of a genius move. Find the characters that are like the information givers, but they have those people that pop in with like the funny. But if you don't have enough information, then people don't know what your story is. So I would say like figure out that balance. But if people aren't really like responding to funny as it goes down the page, you probably have too much information. And that's all I'm gonna say. I went over my time.